In this week's show, I'm joined by Kate Randall, Group Treasurer at Balfour Beatty. She's brilliant. She talks about how it's a mindset shift when you become the number one job as a treasurer, how you have to work collaboratively all the way through, and all the different learnings she's had throughout her career and moving into this role. Well, I'll tell you what, have a listen to some clips and then let's get on with the show.
I think it was a real mindset shift. And what I hadn't appreciated is that once you get in the seat, no one asks you a technical treasury question. You know, that's assumed knowledge. It's much more about influencing and stakeholder management and things like that. It's not technical treasury at all. So it feels very different to how I thought it would feel, if that makes sense. At the end of the day, we are all problem solvers, is what I'd say. You know, that's the job, is solving the problems as they come, but also foreseeing the problems that are going to come and solve them before they come and bite you. How do I do it? I don't know. I think I like to work collaboratively. So I kind of get people involved. I get the team involved. I explain what the problem is and we'll brainstorm. But I also call our friendly banks. You know, I cannot underestimate the power of a good network. And especially as I've moved into this stage of my career, the support from our banking group has been phenomenal. And so if I'm ever unsure of anything or just need to kind of get something out of my head and speak to someone and kind of talk through a few ideas, I'll call them or I'll go and meet them for a coffee. And I think that helps you. Sometimes saying it out loud helps you form that opinion or form that solution. And so then you can go into talking to your CFO or whoever it is with I've considered these views, I've spoken to these people, and it shows that you're not just in your silo. Be nosy. Do you know what? I think that as a treasury professional, no matter what level you are, you have the golden ticket. You're allowed to be nosy. You're allowed to ask questions and be curious. And I think we sometimes underestimate the list part of the treasury analyst. So I think, that takes curiosity. And I think never give that up. You know, even as you move up the ranks, keep asking the questions. What, why? What's causing that? And I think you've got to be brave. And I kind of wish that I was a bit braver when I was young. I think I waited, as I think some of us have the inclination to do, to wait for all the stars to align before I apply for this job, or I wait till I can tick every single thing off on the job description and then, oh, maybe I'll have a chance. It doesn't work like that. I think confidence can come after you've taken that opportunity, and that's how I found it with me. I've grown in confidence since I got the job. So I think you've got to be brave, be bold, be confident, and keep being curious no matter what stage of your career you're at.
Welcome to this week's Treasury Career Corner podcast, where I interview Treasury professionals about their Treasury careers. Each and every week, I'll talk to treasurers about how they build their careers, where they are now, where they see both themselves and the Treasury profession going to next. Let's get on with the show. In this week's show, delighted to be joined by Kate Randall, Group Treasurer at Balfour Beatty. Balfour Beatty is a leading international infrastructure group, trusted by their customers to deliver sustainable solutions and strengthen communities they finance, develop, build, maintain, and operate the increasingly complex and critical infrastructure that supports national economies and deliver projects at the heart of local communities. Collaborating with governments, their customers and partners deliver powerful new solutions, shape thinking, create skylines, you'll see it in the world, and inspire a new generation of talent to be the change makers of tomorrow. Now, obviously, that's a corporate statement. We're going to get Kate later on in the show to explain exactly who Balfour Beatty are. But finally, I've got Kate. I've persuaded her to be on the show. She was like, oh my God, okay, I'll do it. So she's going to give us a great show. But we'll go back to the beginning, how you first started in your career and bring it up to date. And then we'll get a bit more into Balfour so you can give us what Balfour really is rather than the corporate statement and stuff. Kate, over to you. The microphone's yours. Take us back.
Thanks, Mike.
Pleasure.
And yeah, Brilliant to be here. Thank you for
Yeah.
finally persuading me to join.
Oh, great.
So I guess I'm like many treasurers in that it wasn't overly planned to get into corporate treasury. So, you go to university or you don't, and you fall into finance, and then you discover there's a department called Treasury, and actually what they do seems to be much more interesting than what we do. So I have a geography degree, which I I don't know why. I felt like it interested me, something I was good at, and so that's what I did as my degree. Panicked at the end of 3 years, thinking, how am I going to find a job? Don't want to be a teacher, don't want to study volcanoes. I felt that I hadn't finished my learning journey. So finance was something I decided I could do some more exams. I don't know why exams were so important at that time, but I felt like I probably needed to do a few more to become a proper grown up. And so I started in a very small four-partner accountancy firm in deepest, darkest Croydon. And it didn't go well, to be honest. It was a bit of a false start. I was terrible. I really couldn't pass these ACA exams. I hated being an auditor. It was miserable. And so we put a stop to it really a
Right.
year or 18 months in, and I switched to industry.
Did
So I
you, I was going to
converted,
say, but just jump in, but you liked finance though. You
loved,
actually loved
hated
finance, but
audit.
then, but the actual accounting and, that kind of stuff wasn't, but you thought, hang on, finance is still for you. How did you decide that? Because again, if someone's young and they're listening and they're in similar position, we get junior guys. What, you just knew that you were good at maths and finance and that worked, or?
I was terrible at maths. Don't tell
Oh,
anyone. I
oh
needed
no.
a tutor to
Shh.
get me through my GCSEs. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
tell anyone. And in all honesty, that failing my first ACA exam made me question everything. In all honesty, it made me question, am I right for this? And whilst I loved the kind of big business concepts, the how do companies work? How do economies work? I loved those big questions. What I struggled with was being an auditor, doing all of that, being on the road quite a lot, and then having time to study for my exams. And coming from a geography background, I'd not done an accountancy module at university or anything like that. And so it really shook my confidence and really made me think, I'm not sure this is for me. And actually, I'll never forget one of the partners of the firm said, I think you might have a career in HR.
Okay.
And actually, I wondered if I might.
Yeah.
And I spoke to lots of people, thought, no, I'm going to try again, but in the right environment. And I joined GMAC RFC, and I'm forever grateful to them for taking a chance on me with a couple of failed exams and a couple of passes
Yeah.
under my belt, and having to pivot away from practice, converting my part qualified ACA into ACCA was brave, I guess,
Yeah.
of them to take me on.
And so for our international guys, they might not understand the accounting qualifications. So they were converting that for you to become an accountant at RFC. Can you explain, number one, imagine you're a US person just saying about the accountancy bit, and then who are GMAC at RFC?
Yeah. CA tends to be the type of accounting qualification you do when you're in practice,
Yeah.
auditing. And CIMA's, the third one, is more, I'd say, what you do if you're brought up through an industry route. So it tends to be more focused on business partnering in a financial sense rather than necessarily a deep audit knowledge or tax knowledge. So it's like having a heart surgeon and a brain surgeon. They're still incredibly qualified and valuable in their
Yeah.
professions, but they're coming at it from a slightly different
Yeah.
route.
And it's practical accounting within a business and management accounting. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And GMAC RC, so it was the mortgage arm of General Motors,
Right.
which hopefully our American friends will
I
know
think they will.
well.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were lending mortgages, but it wasn't really a high street lending. It was a much more specialist boutique kind of mortgage setup where we would lend to people buy to let, or maybe they'd had some financial problems before. We would do quite racy 105% mortgages back in the day. And this was back, this was pre-financial crisis, which is
Yeah.
the key. and we'd fund the or finance the lending through whole loan securitizations and sort of wholesale bundling up of the mortgages and selling them on.
Yeah.
So I was an accountant in that organization, pretty junior, still getting through my ACCA exams, and I then discovered Treasury. So I was an accountant for the sort of special purpose vehicles that these mortgages were kept in, and I worked quite closely with the Treasury team, and I was curious. And I suppose that's a theme that's going to come through all of this is just being curious and asking questions. And I did, and I asked if there was a vacancy, and in time there was. And so it sounds a bit old-fashioned now, but it was a Treasury settlements officer that I went for and thankfully got. And I think I still probably had a few exams to go with my ACCA, but they took me on, trained me up, and there was sort of no looking back. I'd got the bug.
And then, and Treasury there, you grew a couple of roles and then you moved on from GMAC. Just talk us through that because obviously, there was development from there. So that was your first intro to Treasury, but then you went on and you joined to Expro and stuff like that. So yeah, talk us.
Yeah, I did various roles at GMAC
Yeah,
RFC, and I was there through the financial crisis. So the scrutiny on the Treasury Department was huge. We were growing at a time where the rest of the company was sadly shrinking, and so we were really trying to stabilize the company and managing our way through what was left on the books. It was, out of that kind of crisis, you get growth, I think, and you is an amazing place to learn. And I did various roles, but eventually kind of outgrew it. Treasury's sort of typical sometimes, isn't it? You're waiting for that person to
yeah, next
leave
step.
so you
Yeah,
can step up. So eventually outgrew it and went to Gazprom, the marketing and trading arm of Gazprom,
right.
and was there for a year. And that was a real sort of international focus of the role. Really interesting to do multi-currency, multinational, sort of cross-jurisdiction cash pools and things like that. So again, learned a lot from there. And then from that role, I moved to Expro,
Mhm.
Oilfield Services. So again, oil and gas, interesting treasury set up there as well. And I think I was there a year or so before I had my daughter. So they
Mhm.
saw me through maternity leave and everything that entailed, and came back there, continued to grow, did my T, and then moved on to Thames Water. Expro had, just to go back a step, I guess,
Yeah,
Expro had wanted to do an IPO in the US. And so I stepped sideways for a bit of time to help kind of manage that process from a finance kind of project manager point of view. I knew I was ready for my next challenge,
move. Yeah.
but really liked Expro and really was bought into the journey they were on. And sadly, that didn't work out. The oil price
Was
made it
tanking and stuff like that.
untenable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
worrying. But going into roles like that, again,
mhm.
I've talked to some of the Treasury guys, and they're sometimes a little bit reticent about making a move to another role outside of just core Treasury. What did that give you? Because I think it's always positive when I hear people that have gone Treasury adjacent sort of thing, gone
Yeah.
to other bits, like and learned this other skills and got other relationships. It's never harmed their careers, has it? It's like, what was it like for you?
Exactly that. It certainly didn't harm it. It was tough. It takes you out of your security blanket of the banks and the people and your day-to-day stakeholders into something much, much bigger than just Treasury. And I think it was my first taste of the fact that my skill set that I was building up, my Treasury skill set, can be much more strategic than I had been using it in before. So it was my first sort of taste of the big wide world, and the fact that your relationships can grow, your stakeholder management can grow, but equally you can come back to Treasury. And I think I probably came back as a more rounded Treasury professional in terms of that wider project management piece. We always love a project in Treasury, as
Yeah.
well as that sort of stakeholder management piece as well.
So you'd gone for that. oil prices tanked, so it was time for a move on and things. And you
Yeah,
just mentioned there about Thames Water.
yeah.
Thames Water is, headline news in the UK, but you were then pre that and everything else. Talk us, where Thames Water was in the life cycle of that business
Yeah.
to then bring us up to date, sort of thing, and where you joined them and stuff, because there was some good progression there for you.
Definitely. I joined in 2014, I think,
Yeah,
so a long time ago now. And I had a young daughter. I was looking for something local that would work for us as a young family. We lived in Reading at the time,
yeah,
and so Thames Water's headquarters were still are in Reading. And so it really worked well for us as a family and me as a treasury person. I went in as I think my role was Treasury manager on the operations side. So we were sort of divided into front office, so
quite
sort of
good.
funding and operation,
Yeah,
that kind of split, and accounting as well. And we were very much in the heyday, I would say, very
yeah.
much. It was an amazing place to learn. We were raising lots of debt, lots of complicated things I'd never worked on before, inflation swaps, cross currency interest rate swaps, all sorts of things that I hadn't done, hadn't put in place before. And, I was very grateful to have a seat at the table. And I learned so much there. And that's where I met Andrew Beaumont, who went on to be my treasurer at Balfour Beatty as well, and has
Yeah.
been hugely instrumental in my career.
Talk about having him as a mentor. We talked about it before we came on the
Mm,
podcast, and I
mm,
know Andrew, great guy and stuff like that. But he was a real advocate for yourself, but also a mentor. Where did he challenge you, or talk about the power of
mm.
that? That's something that's come up on. Got Karen van den Driesche coming back on the podcast, and her first ever one. She talked about having crazy ideas that she could bounce off her mentor, or idea things she could just say, "I just don't get it. I just don't understand." And really, they were like a sort of teacher to them but in the workplace. What was that like for you?
I think Andrew's, I'm still in touch with him now. He's enjoying a very well-earned retirement with his
Yeah,
family, but he was more than a mentor. He was a sponsor for my career as well. And, I think he saw potential. And, I've suffered with my lack of confidence through my whole career. And, he was really the one instrumental in helping me navigate that and building my confidence up slowly but surely. And, he's brilliant at teaching, but challenging as well, challenging the status quo and very good at putting the right team around him. And hopefully that's a skill that has been passed down to me, and I now hugely value the team.
yeah,
So he's a technical person, but more than that, he's a relationship driven person. He understands the depth of treasury relationships, banking relationships, stakeholder relationships. And I think that, where companies go through difficult times, those relationships are just so, so important. And, he's definitely taught me the value of that.
So then talk us about the moves to Balfour Beatty, because I'm keen to get into there as well with Andrew and involved then.
Yeah, I was so shocked when Andrew said he was leaving Thames Water. I just loved working with him and learning from him and everything. And I was so sad to see him go. But it was at a time where I knew that my time there was probably coming to an end as well. I wasn't ready for a deputy group treasurer job, but I felt I was probably ready for an assistant treasurer role, something bigger than I had, but not too big. And so I was looking and I used him like I do all the time as a sounding board. And I said, I'm considering this. What do you think? And he then told me that he had a role at Balfour. He was having to rebuild the team, on through sort of seven consecutive profit warnings back in 13, 14. And they were in the middle of really rebuilding the business from the ground up.
What is the business, or what was the business then, and what is it now? Because I know there's been an evolution there as well. So when you were joining, who were Balfour Beatty then, and now what are they now?
Do you know what? Our DNA is still very much the same. And I
Okay.
always say, if you have, in the UK, if you've driven on a motorway, if you've taken a train, if you've taken an aeroplane from one of the main airports, then you've touched some of the infrastructure that we've built. We are at our heart engineers and constructors, and we were then and we are now. And in the US, I should mention the US as well,
Yes.
we are.
Was the US big at that time or not? Was it? Where was it?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it was. It's such an interesting business in the US, but the example I love to give is that we built the original Disney Princess Castle and continue to be one of Disney contractors, and we build for Universal, but we build everything in between. We build data centers and we build, heavy civils over there as well. So we've got a really good history, a really long history. But I think the difference between then and now is really the discipline and the sort of central control that we now have versus some really smart, very well-intentioned people, but doing things in a very, very sort of federated, disconnected way that unfortunately we had some really big struggles
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
almost got bought by Carillion. And we know how Carillion ended. There's a lot to be grateful for that we're still here, but we've really repaired the balance sheet. We're in a much stronger position than we were back then. And we've now got this sort of real culture of financial discipline and bidding discipline in terms of the jobs that we're going for and the work that we're bidding for. So we're no longer chasing that top line. We're really kind of eyes open in terms of what contracts are good for us to pursue.
And you were 8 years as around there as deputy treasurer, becoming the treasurer.
Yeah.
How did your mindset shift or change as you went into that role? Sort of, the Andrew process. He was coaching you as a mentor, which is great, and then he goes, "Here you go. Here are the keys," and you're like, "Oh, okay, thanks for that." How did it work?
Andrew was very clear on his plans, and I'm very grateful for that
Yeah,
he tipped me the nod a couple of years before he retired. That was his intention. And so I had a kind of 2 year run at things, I would say.
training
So
program. Yeah,
yeah, training program, which felt like the longest job interview ever at times. But I was really grateful that and it wasn't widely known at all. It was just
yeah,
between me and him that was his intention. And things happened. There was no guarantee that that was what was going to happen, but I knew that that was the intention. And so I had nothing to lose in terms of getting myself ready for that point. And it meant that as we renegotiated the revolver or did a US private placement issuance, I was taking the lead on more things with him as my safety blanket.
yeah.
So I'd say, this is what I'm thinking we should do. What do you think? And so I always had him as that kind of, safety net in case I was getting it wrong, which was great for my confidence, but also really good for the business as well, that they had this very controlled process. And you're right, it was a real mindset shift. And I don't think that I truly believed I could do it until a few months
You're
in,
doing it. Yeah,
until I was doing it. Yeah.
yeah.
And I had, as soon as I got into Treasury, I had this fixation in my head that I was going to become, and I don't know what made me think it. I wanted to become group treasurer by the time I was 40. And it was group treasurer of a FTSE company. So I wanted it to be big and meaningful. And I missed it by a couple of years, but I'm still very, I'm still very
You got
proud
that.
I
Yeah.
got there. But I think it was a real mindset shift. And what I hadn't appreciated is that once you get in the seat, no one asks you a technical treasury question. That's assumed knowledge. It's much more about influencing and stakeholder management and things like that. It's not technical treasury at all. So it feels very different to how I thought it would feel, if that makes sense.
Touch on that a little bit, but as you say, you're not getting asked the technical questions, but Andrew's passed on the keys, he's walked out the door, you've got now the title on the desk and everything else, and then things that come through the door, whatever, what still surprised you, or what were the things that I had written down here? What are the things that nobody really tells you about becoming the treasurer? But you've been told, you've been in the train, you're doing it, living that role for 2 years. But were there, he was then gone, and yes, you could pick up the phone on a separate basis. But things actually, you've got that head title, you know, were there differences, or what was, how did it, what was it about it?
I think it's the speed at which you sometimes have to make decisions that surprised me. And I'm a belt and braces girl. I like to do all my homework. I like to evaluate lots of different options and then come up with my own. You don't have the time to do that or agonize over your decisions. And I think that's been the biggest shock of them all, is that, you have to be covering an awful lot of ground. The breadth of the role is enormous, and an organization like Balfour Beatty, very commercially focused as well. And so you have to be opining on things and deciding things really quite quickly. And so that's taken, that's taken a lot of getting used to, and a lot of getting used to in terms of backing myself
Yeah.
and having the confidence that I'm making the right decision, and people value my decision. And that feels quite different to being in that sort of number two seat.
This podcast, as you may have worked out, has no sponsors, has no ads. Nobody pays me to record these episodes. I make it because I love corporate treasury, and I want to help treasury professionals just like you. If you're getting value from this, there's a couple of things I'd ask. Share it with your friends. Tell them about it, how you've enjoyed it. If it's helping you in your treasury career, fantastic. But then maybe connect with me on LinkedIn. Mike Richards, I'm there. You can actually look me up. My URL is actually linkedin.com/MR or Mr. Treasury, if you want to call it that. Hit connect, drop me a quick note, say you found me through the podcast on Apple or Spotify. I read every single message, and yes, I will reply. There's no funnel, no sales pitch. It's just a chance to say hello, stay in touch, and see what I can do to help. So anyway, let's get back to the episode. So I recently did my panel in Amsterdam, had Lorena, Felix, had Marco Schuschman from Bruker. And one of the things he made as one of his key points to that point, exactly, going through periods of uncertainty, volatility, and they had all the banking crisis with Silicon Valley Bank and everything else. And he talked it through on stage, which was great, because he said it all kicked off and suddenly he's like, okay, and we've got these exposures and all this stuff's happening. He realized he couldn't go to his CFO and just say, oh, by the way, this has all happened.
Yeah.
He was like, oh goodness, right, okay, and a few other things. He said, what's the solution? What are we going to do? And he had to go, before he even walked into that CFO's office, not only with the plan, but actually the plan, the questions his boss was going to ask, the plan, and also have the partial solution. Not all the answers, but a lot of them. If someone's facing that, how do you've touched on it there, but someone's planning that, oh, actually, that's a really good point. So how do you do it?
That's a good question. I think at the end of the day, we are all problem solvers, is what I'd say. That's the job, is solving the problems as they come, but also foreseeing the problems that are going to come and solve them before they come and bite you. How do I do it? I don't know. I think I like to work collaboratively. So I kind of get people involved. I get the team involved. I explain what the problem is and we'll brainstorm. But I also call our friendly banks. I cannot underestimate the power of a good network. And especially as I've moved into this stage of my career, the support from our banking group has been phenomenal. And so if I'm ever unsure of anything or just need to kind of get something out of my head and speak to someone and kind of talk through a few ideas, I'll call them or I'll go and meet them for a coffee. And I think that helps you. Sometimes saying it out loud helps you form that opinion or form that solution. And so then you can go into talking to your CFO or whoever it is with I've considered these views, I've spoken to these people, and it shows that you're not just in your silo.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so easy for finance sometimes to just be in their kind of ivory tower, their silo, and not realize that they're a strategic part of the business and really critical to that kind of commercial success of that business as well. So I think always keeping an eye up and out is really, really important. And I'm sure I don't do it perfectly, but
No,
it's served me well so far.
So you're talking to your banks, and actually, it's a question I'd like to ask when I get a chance. You might not be doing a corporate transaction. You might have your banking group might be talking to them, but without stringing them along or dangling that carrot all the time, how do you maintain those relationships? Bar just saying, let's have, they're busy people as well. Let's just have another coffee, like, or how do you balance that relationship with in the quieter times as well? Yes, we have busy times, but how do you do that?
I always think that bank relationships have to work on every level. So I don't think it just falls to me. It falls on all the team, and I think that it's so important for our cash manager to be speaking to each of the banks on a regular basis. Our grads, our juniors, speaking to their juniors to pool knowledge, share expertise. It's got to work on every level. So regular drumbeat of communication at some level of the team, I think it shows that we are, interested, we're open to ideas, we're listening. So I feel like, and I don't think it's a burden at all, but to use the phrase, I think I share the burden with the entire team, and we're always very grateful for the depth of relationships that we have. Some of our banking group have been there through our really bad times. They've banked us for decades. And so it's something we take very seriously. It's something we enjoy doing. We're quite a sociable team. We always get out and about, especially with our banks as well. And so it's not formalized, I guess is what I'm saying. We don't have a calendar. We don't tick them off on a list. It's much more intuitive than that. And I think we're good at doing what we say we're going to do. I think we're good at delivering on what we say we're going to do, but also not afraid of sharing bad news as quick as we share good news. So I think we're authentic in our relationships, which is and on the other side of that, we've got really great relationships the other way. So we're in a good position.
You and I persuaded you, twisted your arm, wouldn't let you leave until you said yes to doing the podcast when I saw you at the conference, UK Treasurers Conference in Liverpool. And one of the other things that you and I were talking about there was, I've talked to other people about it as well. If anyone had shoved AI on the end of a session, everyone was rushing to it to see what's happening, AI technology and stuff. But this is now, I think we're over it a bit, but I think it's evolving a little bit. Some of the views we've had it on the panel, had it at the panel in London, had it on all the recent panels that I've been talking to people. The future, everyone was talking about, and we did our round tables, and the feedback from the groups was, yeah, it's all very well talking about the future, but what about talking about the now? And actually, if we're going to try and build AI on this, you know, old broken data and everything else, that's not really going to help us. How are you seeing AI technology? What again, someone listening today, what's working? We had Boyan recently on. He was fantastic talking about AI and how he's used it where he is. And he's so into it. He wrote a book about it. But the fact is, where do you as a treasurer today see the greatest benefits or weaknesses, or what are your thoughts?
It's really interesting because at Balfour, we've been very open about our investment in technology. So we rolled out Copilot. We made a 7 million investment in Copilot last year. And when you're in a low margin business like ours, that's a substantial,
Yeah.
but it's a bit of I can't think of a word, kind of difference, I guess, in what we're seeing on our construction sites versus what we're seeing in our construction sites. It's really practical. We're using AI a lot. So, where you can improve information quality, identify risks, things like that, there's some real competitive advantages there. Getting things right first time really takes cost out of the process. But then, we are also, I suppose, with our risk management hats on, very conscious of the guardrails. So we are across defence projects, critically important national infrastructure projects, secret squirrel projects that I don't even know anything about, their code names. So, we've got to be really careful with how we deploy it. And in Treasury, we're not doing a whole lot yet. We're starting to, I guess, explore. We are knee deep in a TMS implementation at the moment. So I know if I tell the team we're going to do another project, they'll all up sticks and leave. So we need to get that system
Yeah,
fully implemented. But the next phase will, of course, be looking at AI in our cash forecasting. Cash is the lifeblood of construction. Without cash, we are in serious trouble. So cash forecasting is at the heart of everything we do. And if we can use and that iterative learning process to get incremental gains in our forecast, that will have a massive impact for us. And I know the TMS that we've chosen has that ability as well, and they're making a lot of their own investments in AI. So it will come. I'm not at the cutting edge of it, I'm afraid to say, but
no need to be. Yeah,
we will enjoy learning about it and implementing it next year, hopefully.
cool. And we're not at the end yet, so we've got some questions such as you've. The great thing is you've come up from more junior role all the way through Treasury. So how have you handled that pressure as it's grown and resilient? Now as you said, you had that gentle introduction to the treasurer role, and there might be other people in a similar way. How have you handled pressure and some of the things that come along with the role of the group treasurer? We touched on it a little bit, but it was more I wanted to dive in that because what's your definition of success, for example? And how do you do this? You talk about the team, that's great, but how do you then work with your team to sort of coach them on it?
I've had a lot of help along the way, so it was great timing. But last year, I was part of our Balfour Beatty flagship development program called the
Yeah,
Future Leaders Program. And that really gave me a lot of skills that I didn't have before and came at the perfect time as I was stepping up into the GT role. It gave me a lot of practical experience and a cohort of people at similar stages in their career to me, whether they were in our power business, designing amazing distribution things that I don't know a lot about, or whether they were in our
yeah,
sustainability department. It was across the business, but we were all at that kind of stepping stone of getting
yeah,
into the next role. And that group of people have just been an amazing network and support for us all as we step up. A lot of us have had promotions, and as part of that, I had a coach. I've had an external coach as well who's been amazing. So what's the phrase? It takes a village. It really does.
yeah. Love
It
it.
takes so many people, and I hope I do that with the team. We have the team is just phenomenal, and they are the most amazing group of people. And I was lucky enough to inherit a couple, but then I've been able to build around them as well. And when COVID happened and lockdown happened, it was a really unsettling time for people. So we went to work at home like everybody did, but we put in an 11 o'clock call every day. And part of it was to check on everyone to make sure they were okay, because working from home was really isolating. I was losing my mind doing homeschooling. And
Yeah,
so it was much a check-in on our well-being as it was to say, what work stuff are you covering today? Have you seen this email? Are you doing that? And we've kept it going. So every day at 11 o'clock, we have a team call, and it can be really short. It can be 10 minutes, just a quick round the table. What are you doing? What are you working on? Anything we need to know. But it can also be the opportunity to spot where people are struggling, or for me to say, I'm struggling. I need help. Can you help me with this?
yeah.
And so it's a great way to sort of just check in on everyone and make sure we're directing our own resources in the right way. But I love seeing everyone every day, and it means that we can work
Good.
flexibly. Yeah.
And outside of that, you become a non-exec director alongside your GT role. Has that sort of changed how you think about treasury leadership, business influence? What impacts has that had, or how has that helped you?
I think it's really reinforced my view that the Treasury skill set is hugely transferable into strategic decision making. So I was lucky enough to be introduced to the Platform Project, which is a not-for-profit, through my Future Leaders Development Program last year. And it really resonated with me. It was an organization that helps young people access jobs. Really, it's trying to give young people the skills that they will need to access employment. And there's children there with very complex needs, a lot of neurodiversity, and that resonated with me having diversity in my family. And they were looking for a new finance director. Their finance director had termed out and he was moving on. And it was just a really fortuitous kind of timing that I was involved in helping them through my leadership program, but they were looking for someone with my skill set. So that's how I got involved. And I haven't been there a year yet, so it's still quite new. But being able to come in and help them with things like delegated levels of approval. I've helped them spin off some board committees so they're able to make more flexible decision making. And that's been really from learning as I go as a treasurer, what kind of governance here and translating that into a different setting. So I think it's just reinforced the fact that an amazing career and we need to recruit more people into it. It's amazing. Yeah, best job in the world.
Exactly. And so we're going to put your LinkedIn details in the show notes as we do each and every week. Then the takeaways. So someone's sitting there, listening to this on a Friday, they've got their cup of coffee, they're a treasury analyst, then there's maybe an assistant treasurer, and then a group treasurer. So maybe advice for those three levels of people. What do you say to the junior guys, mid-level, senior guys? What are the takeaways? It doesn't have to be one piece, it can be three pieces. It's up to you. What advice?
Be nosy. Do you know what? I think that as a treasury professional, no matter what level you are, you have the golden ticket. You're allowed to be nosy. You're allowed to ask questions and be curious. And I think we sometimes underestimate the list part of the treasury analyst. So I think, that takes curiosity. And I think never give that up. Even as you move up the ranks, keep asking the questions. What, why? What's causing that? And I think you've got to be brave. And I kind of wish that I was a bit braver when I was young. I think I waited, as I think some of us have the inclination to do, to wait for all the stars to align before I apply for this job, or I wait till I can tick every single thing off on the job description and then, oh, maybe I'll have a chance. It doesn't work like that. I think confidence can come after you've taken that opportunity. And that's how I found it with me. I've grown in confidence since I got the job. So I think you've got to be brave, be bold, be confident, and keep being curious no matter what stage of your career you're at.
Amazing. Thank you very much. You've been absolutely amazing. Great to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before you finish today's show, a quick reminder. You can earn CTP credits just by listening to the podcast. Listen to the show, take a short online quiz, pass the quiz, got to do that, and then we'll send you CTP credits. This means you can recertify, which I know you have to do every 2 years, and lots of people do it. It's so convenient. They do it whilst they're commuting, they might be at the gym, walking the dog. We're there to help you. It's designed to fit around you and your real treasury jobs, not add more work to it. If you're already listening, you might as well get the credit for it. All you need to do, head to the episode page, take the quiz, and as I say, as long as you pass, we will send you the CTP credits. I know, it's all part of the service. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate your support. I'll see you soon. Thanks.